Hello everyone, today I want to talk about one of my favorite types of movies and show off my collection since I now have every copy of all the movies in this genre that I really wanted to have for myself to watch over and over again over the years, and that is disaster movies. For me, disaster movies had two real peaks at a heyday of the 1970s, and it peaked again in the 90s with a lot of decent movies, and there have been disaster movies since the beginning of film. They've always come and gone to different degrees, but I think there really was a flood of them in the 70s and then a resurgence in the 90s. And a lot of modern ones, not so great in my opinion. They're just a lot of really poor CG effects that are driving the story more than the actual characters. So a lot of those were, one-time viewing. You're not going to see those in this collection because they're not ones I'd want to watch again. But I really enjoy disaster movies, particularly really good ones that follow a certain type of structure. I mean, disaster movie is fairly loose. There are a lot of movies where you can consider what's happening to be a disaster, but it's not necessarily a disaster movie. Disaster movies, for the most part, a couple little exceptions, but for the most part, the thing that the characters are fighting against, the disaster, the event, in a way, the antagonist of the story is something that has no sense of malice and something that has no sense of real just motivation of its own. Is really just nature. It's just an event. It's humans surviving with each other in cooperation or against each other in some elements, against something that is merely an event, something that is occurring without direct interaction. It's usually something like an alien invasion movie. I wouldn't consider a disaster movie. It's something where, terrorists have hijacked a plane or whatever. I don't really consider that a disaster movie, but some sort of outside event. And there is one series that does have an element of outside influence bringing about part of the disaster, but overall, most of the disaster movies that I really enjoy are something where the event is not necessarily caused on purpose. And those are the ones I really enjoy. And they also are movies that have a sometimes overpowering sense of melodrama that really drive home the almost soap opera-esque melodrama in the stories, and that's really part of what sells them. And you have typically, and a lot of the ones that I really enjoy, a good third of the movie, if not almost half of it sometimes up front, is pre-disaster, is just focused on building up these characters, little dramas in their lives, little stories that give these characters a sense of background and familiarity by the time the event occurs, and this slow building tension for, depending on the movie, half hour to close to an hour or more before the disaster occurs. And it really is that slow build of tension, that time spent getting to know the characters before the thing happens, that really sells their attempt at survival when the event occurs. And I think a lot of the ones that really understand and soak up that melodrama instead of shying away with it tend to be some of my favorites. So we will start with, I think, the 90s, go through some of those here before moving back into my favorites, which are from the 70s and into the very early 80s. The 90s, because that's really where I started. That's where I grew up going to see some of these in the movie theaters or renting them on VHS as soon as they came out. So these were a lot of the first ones that I was being able to see. They're readily available, and ones, again, I could see in the theater experience. So those were ones that I really enjoyed. And we'll start with a most recent pickup, one that actually finished my collection of disaster movies that I just rewatched on LaserDisc because I had not seen it in such a long time, and really drives home the point of the melodrama aspect. That is Deep Impact on LaserDisc, with a little bit of a making of at the end, which was a nice addition along with the original trailer. And the 90s too, I'll mention here, the 90s was a great decade for disaster movies by having competition between studios. This happens with a lot of movies, but I feel like when it comes to disaster movies, the 90s was the best decade for having two volcano movies going up against each other, two, twister-type weather event movies coming up against each other, two asteroid movies coming up against each other, all being released, really competing. And for me, a lot of those, one was better than the other, and I only have the one. Because this is, for me, definitely the better one. I feel like I feel like this is one that again focuses more on the characters and the melodrama. It is really very focused on the people and the drama rather than the event. It's not a structure like an action movie. It is one that is structured more, again, like a melodrama, and when you do have those small action elements, they aren't the main driving force. The main driving force is seeing the characters and their reactions and their relationships, and that's the main driving force for that. So Deep Impact, really enjoyed. I loved rewatching it. It was one that, again, it depends whether or not you enjoy getting sucked into that over-the-top drama element and those relationships, whether or not you enjoy a movie like that. For me, I get sucked into the melodrama and love it. Another one in that vein that had a competing film is Dantes Peak. I saw Dantes Peak and the competing film Volcano in theaters. I saw both of them, and where Volcano failed was, for these types of movies, the situations are outlandish, they're over the top, they are taking a real plausible event and stretching it into absurdity and you need to have, in this type of movie, the suspension of disbelief. You need to be able to get sucked into what's happening enough to where, even if what's happening really is in reality a bit absurd or outside the boundaries of believability, you need to be able to sucked in enough to where within the moment, within that 2-hour time frame you're watching the movie, you do believe it. You do feel that it's really happening, and you don't care that in the back of your mind some things that are happening are a little ridiculous or a little exaggerated. You just, in that moment, feel the excitement, you feel the drama, you believe it in that moment. And Volcano failed for me to where, even as a kid watching it in the theaters, it was too silly. That's one that I've only rewatched, I think, once since then. Wouldn't own a copy because it was too silly. It didn't have that suspension of disbelief for me at all. It was just too ridiculous. But Dantes Peak did. Dantes Peak, I'd say it'd be a stretch to call it more intellectual than Volcano, but it was a smarter picture than Volcano, and I think the structure really gave you more of that sense of believability and excitement, and I did like Linda Hamilton and Pierce Brosnan. I thought both did a great job in this movie, so I really enjoyed Dantes Peak far more than Volcano, so I went with this for my collection. And this does have some interesting bonus features, the making of, and some commentary, along with the general trailer and filmmaker bios and cast bios. But the making of and the feature commentary really add to this, and I think it's just a good movie overall for this genre. Some decent special effects, and again, ones that focus on the characters and the science, even if it's not necessarily realistic science. If it focuses on those elements a little bit more than just action and the special effects, even though those tend to be grand, those are the ones I like more. And that also leads me to Twister. This is for some reason, seems to be a love it or hate it movie. I encounter the same number of people that are like, Twister's awesome, man, or dang, Twister sucked. But I am in the Twister's awesome camp. I always really enjoyed this movie. I saw it in theaters, and then I saw it on TV a couple times and rented it on VHS. I'd seen it so many times, never owned a copy until I grabbed this special widescreen edition on LaserDisc, so very happy to add that to the collection. I just always enjoyed this movie. I think it's a fun disaster movie from the 90s. And a related one to that, this overall is my favorite, even though it's not as good, my favorite Twister-related movie is actually a made-for-TV movie, Night of the Twisters. I have my VHS and my DVD copy. This is one of those, good times entertainment, family TV movie type thing you'd see on like the Hallmark Channel or the Family Channel, things like that in the 90s to early 2000s, based off a true story. And I originally saw this on TV and was super into it because Laura Bertram is in this, who is my favorite actress and definitely my celebrity crush, and is coming right off of watching Ready or Not before, Andromeda and things like that. And she was in this movie, and I was like, oh, I gotta see this. I saw it, I had it taped off TV, and eventually found the VHS and the DVD. But for what it is, for these, low budget, very saccharine, sweet, melodramatic TV movie of the week type things, it actually does a really good job, and I've really enjoyed it. It's such a fun movie. Last one up for the 90s is another one that I consider to be a little underrated because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. It is Stallone's Daylight. I have on HD DVD. super shimmery cover there, with a bunch of bonus features. It's the feature commentary and music video, a bunch more. Really good making of, though. That's one that I really like as far as the extras on here. And this, I think, is a fun disaster movie. And I think Stallone really brings it home in this. There's a lot of great effects. It has some great action scenes, and Stallone is wonderful and really puts himself into the character and puts himself into the somewhat over-the-top and absurd melodramatic moments with the character interactions, but I found it to be very, very enjoyable. I do like that, so I have that on HD DVD. Next we have a movie that's not the first disaster movie ever, but really the first of what I consider to be the modern disaster movies with a certain type of structure and the special effects, and one that ushered in the golden age of disaster movies of the 70s into the very beginning of the 80s. We have Irwin Allen's The Poseidon Adventure. Still a classic. Just such a great movie. It's been remade, it's been parodied, it's a movie that's had so many similar movies come out over the years because it's such a fantastic picture. It really has every element of the disaster movie that I like. Amazing special effects, especially incredible practical special effects, and a lot of these have really good miniature work in them as well. Just amazing, like, real sets, and just it feels so much more interesting and involved. You get more involved, and it feels more believable when it is not just a bunch of CGI effects. So this great movie, and again, it has that super long build-up of the drama in the beginning, and it really focuses on the melodrama and those sad dramatic moments, and it really just sells the whole experience, and I get super involved with movies like this. And I really like this edition, this ultimate high-definition experience edition, because of the special features. Of course, they have a commentary of multiple commentaries. You have the Hollywood backstories, the Poseidon Adventure, look back on the cast, a bunch of things about the writing, things about the genre as a whole, what this ushered in the 70s as far as disaster movies. Is such a ridiculous number of special features on a single disc here with the movie that this is an edition I really wanted to have, and very, very happy with that one. This is on a double pack Blu-ray DVD combo of the Domino Principle, but the one I'm talking about here is the Cassandra Crossing, which is fantastic. With Sophia Loren, this is such a great movie. It is, I really think that it moves even beyond just the silly melodrama that I really enjoy to having some genuinely great tense moments and some very interesting characters. Martin Sheen does a good job with Ava Gardner. They're really great paired together. A lot of comedic value there and good dramatic performances. Richard Harris and Burt Lancaster. Sophia Loren for me obviously was the main draw, and the reason why I picked it up to begin with, because I thought the cover looked cool and I saw Sophia Loren's name in her face. So I'm like, okay, I'll watch that. And I was so happy when I originally did, and I really love having this copy. The Blu-ray looks really good in particular, and this is one that I think, more than any of these, probably stretches the disaster movie thing a little bit more, because the disaster is very contained. It's more about the potential disaster, and then, without spoiling, at the end of the movie there is a disaster that befalls a large number of people, but it's more about the attempt to contain a potential disaster within an area on this train, as a highly contagious disease is running rampant on a train after someone is accidentally exposed and then runs away from security and ends up hopping on this train trying to get away. And it's just fantastic. I love every second of if you really like the tension and the drama elements of disaster movies, this is one to check out. Really, really well made. Just a couple more here before we move on to my absolute favorites. We have a few that are just kind of okay. They're fun to watch, but I enjoyed them for what they are. They're a little bit more on the cheesy side. Ones like Avalanche, which is one that was not an Irwin Allen picture, that was thought to be one by many, many people because his name was so synonymous with disaster movies after the Poseidon Adventure and Towering Inferno, etc., that there were so many disaster movies, and on TV too, into the 80s, that were kind of, people thought of as his movies that he wasn't involved in. So you have Avalanche, and you also have The Swarm with Michael Caine, LaserDisc. And we have Earthquake. This was pretty good with Charlton Heston. Not one of my absolute favorites, but Earthquake is still fun, and again has really good practical effects and really good miniature work that I enjoy, and it really is one of those that just sucks you in with the characters and the melodrama and really makes that the star of the show right before the disaster happens, and then you care more about what the heck is actually happening to these people. And it's great. You know, Admiral Odama is in it, which is always fun, but you really have the best of the best to come very shortly. Before I get onto my absolute favorite, the one that I have sitting over here, I have a small collection of, moving on to a franchise of disaster movies that is amazing, even though the law of diminishing returns comes very quickly as with each sequel. We have Airport, the terminal pack here, which is the franchise collection, which includes Airport 1975, 77, and then the Concorde, Airport 79, which you can probably skip because it's horrible. But the first three, the first one is amazing. The first one I also have this separate Blu-ray DVD combo pack because I love it so much. It is my second favorite disaster movie. It has a couple of decent special features, but it's more about the movie itself. You know, 10 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. This is one of my favorite disaster movies ever, and one that I think hinges on the character and the drama and the build-up of that drama almost more than any other one to really sell what's happening. Fantastic. And then you move on to Airport 75 with a different storyline with the mid-air collision, which is fun, I think. It's goofy fun, great drama towards the end especially, but nowhere near the quality of the first one. But certain characters, especially some of the more minor roles, I think really sell it. You have Myrna Loy in here playing a hilarious drunk, which I was a huge fan of the Thin Man movies and her work in general. Great. And then you move on to Airport 77, which feels a lot like the Poseidon Adventure on a plane. You have 747 is trapped underwater in the Bermuda Triangle, a race against time and the elements to save the passengers and crew. And that one again just has a ton of really good character actors that are just giving it their all, and just the absurdity of the whole thing, and it's just so much fun. It's really fun. I just get so sucked into how enjoyable Airport 75 and 77 are. They're just fun movies, but the original one I think is just genuinely a fantastic movie, and one you should definitely check out. So here's the fold out for the Terminal Collection, which stinks that they're on double-sided DVD. That's the one thing that's not good about the pack, but it's such a cheap and easy way of getting all the Airport movies on one set. Definitely check it out, and they're decent quality as well. For the first Airport, though, this Blu-ray DVD combo is like the way to go, to have both the DVD and the Blu-ray. I love this movie. This movie's fantastic. This is definitely my second favorite disaster movie, and it's one of my favorite movies of that era. It's just so much fun, and I get so sucked into the drama in that one. Like I adore the characters and the kind of soap opera elements of it. I love the first Airport. Can't talk about that enough. But we got to move on to my absolute favorite, to me, the king of all disaster movies, the one that I can watch over and over again. I mean, this movie, if I had to go through my favorite movies, this would easily be in the top 100. It might make the top 50 just because I love it so much. I don't care if it's a ridiculous disaster movie. It's great. I love every second of this film from start to finish. Amanda's seen it so many times just from like me watching it so many times, because I never get tired of it. I don't know how many times I've watched this movie. I will never get tired of the towering Inferno. It is so great. It is such a big step up from the already amazing Poseidon Adventure. They went way over the top with the special effects, with the budget, with every element of this, the star power in here. Oh, I am so into every moment of this movie. We have the special widescreen edition on LaserDisc, the Towering Inferno. This is the earlier release in the 80s. There was a 90s release later on LaserDisc. But I'll get the fold out here. But yes, this is one of my favorite movies of the 1970s, and it is such a darn good movie. I love The Towering Inferno. Every second of it, from start to finish, is just an absolute blast. I get so involved in the setup of this movie before the disaster happens, and kind of knowing what's going to occur and seeing little things like the first sparks flying that no one catches in the beginning, and all about the tower itself and all the different people involved with the tower or living there, or everyone that's up in the party on the top floor. And it just, when the whole thing hits, it's great. There's so much going on in this movie that's fantastic. The fire chief is like one of the most lovable like characters in the whole movie. I mean, that guy should be dead on his feet working so hard in that movie. Just such a great movie. So I had the LaserDisc, and then I also had this special edition DVD box set here. This is so cool. But yeah, this is The Towering Inferno. Pull this out. So you have the slipcover, and then you have the two sets of giant, this is a huge booklet. You have the regular, just kind of manual there, the program for the special edition, and then you have an entire booklet that comes with it with information about the movie and the actors who are involved, because there's another one of those hallmarks of disaster movies, particularly during the 70s, was shove every Hollywood actor, every name that you can get into this movie. And a lot of times they were like older in the twilight of their career, or a lot of, like B-movie actors, and they had a few big names, but it was just like every name that you can get, shove them in this movie and put their name on the poster. And it is so fantastic. So much about the movie, and this little booklet that just comes with this edition on the DVD. You have disc 1 for the feature, and then I like it's pretty standard artwork for the movie. I like the artwork on disc 2. It's like a little different for all the different special features. And man, there's so much. I mean, even disc 1, just with the movie, has commentary tracks on that, because there's so many special features they wouldn't even all go on the second disc. I mean, it's hours. There's 9 featurettes on disc 2 for this edition. This is like, I really like this copy of The Towering Inferno. 9 featurettes, so much to watch, because I love this movie. This movie's great, Towering Inferno. And then we also, of course, have it on Blu-ray. This is just such a great movie. Makes me want to watch it. Just like I haven't watched it in probably like close to a year at this point. It's like I want to watch it again. And I also have one of the 2 books that the concept was based off of. The one that I really enjoy, The Tower. So I had the pretty beat up old paperback book we found at a thrift store. Amanda found it quite a while ago. But yeah, so I was able to read that, and that was a lot of fun getting into seeing where a lot of the story came from. But to me, that is the greatest disaster movie ever made. I think it always will be. It's amazing. Every element of the performances, the build-up of the story, when the actual disaster happens, I think it's some of the coolest special effects and coolest set designs I've ever seen for this type of movie. It is a blast from start to finish. If you like disaster movies or that type of thing at all, check this out if you have not seen it. The Towering Inferno, to me, is just an amazing film I'll watch over and over again. So those are my disaster movies. There are many more out there, but these are all the ones that I really wanted for my collection to rewatch over time, particularly, obviously, Poseidon Adventure, the airport movies, the first 3, Towering Inferno, and some of those favorite 90s ones. Check out the Cassandra Crossing if you've not seen that. That's a really good movie, and that's one that I never hear anyone talk about. It wasn't a massive hit. It's not one that has a ton of re-releases over time. It's on a couple different formats, but it's just not one that it's usually like paired with another movie or in some kind of movie pack. Like, it's one of those that's kind of almost lost to time in a way. But check that out as well. But yeah, Towering Inferno, if you haven't seen that, you gotta watch that movie. The movie's great. Yeah, these are my disaster movies, and I'd love to hear what are some of your favorite disaster movies of all time. Are you like me and you like a lot of the ones from the 70s, or the 90s really your time for those kind of movies, or do you actually enjoy a lot of these more recent ones? Let me know down below what some of your favorite disaster movies are, and I'm going to go watch The Towering Inferno.